the fifth kind. This thought-provoking program is brought to you in association with Gaia.com. Follow the links to unlock the entire Gaia library. Mali, West Africa, home to the Dogon people. Living simply and in harmony with their natural environment, the Dogon are a tribe whose ancestral roots lie in ancient Egypt. In 1931, two French anthropologists were surprised to find that the Dogon people possessed some astonishingly advanced astronomical information. The Dogon's culture is one without high technology or science, focusing instead on spirituality, well-being, and harmony with nature. The astronomical information the Dogon people shared with the researchers had been curated by their elders through many generations. The Dogon's canon of sacred knowledge included precise information about the three-star system we call Sirius. They were able to describe and pinpoint the location of the distant star Sirius B, a white dwarf star invisible to the naked eye. The Dogon were ahead of mainstream astronomy by nearly 3 decades. The existence of Sirius B was unknown to mainstream Western astronomy until the production of modern telescopes in the 1950s.
The Dogon tribe of West Africa were discovered in 1935 by two French anthropologists, Grial and Dieterlen were their names. These two anthropologists eventually gained the respect of the Dogon shaman and were allowed to hear their sacred knowledge. What amazed these anthropologists was that the Dogon tribe possessed knowledge of the Sirius star system that no ancient people should ever have possessed.
When asked how they had obtained this knowledge, the tribal elders shared their ancestral narrative of the Nommos. The Nommos were a race of beings from the Sirius star system who visited Earth thousands of years ago.
They claim that a group of what could only be described as alien creatures called the Nomos descended down to Earth, and that this group of beings imparted to them the knowledge that they then possessed about the Sirius star system. What they couldn't understand was how it was they had knowledge of a Sirius B, which is a white dwarf star. It's the smallest form of visible star that we know of, and we can barely see it with modern-day telescopes. And yet they knew of its absolute existence, and they called it Potolo, which is a tiny seed found in West Africa. And they said it's a tiny star, but it's the heaviest thing that there is. Well, they were alluding to the fact that white dwarf stars have some of the highest density of any stellar bodies that we know of. And that's not something an ancient people should have known anything about. They even spoke of a Sirius C, yet another stellar body in the Sirius star system, something which wasn't proven to be true until 1995, a full 60 years after the discovery of this tribe.
They knew that there was a 3-star system, something we didn't know about until the 20th century. They knew that Sirius B was a white dwarf. We didn't even know what one of those was until about 20 years ago. And when the anthropologists asked them, how do you have all this information about the Sirius star system? They said, oh, we learned that from the people who taught us. They were from Sirius C. You can think about the Mayan calendar, the Aztecs, the Sumerians, the Egyptians. All of them had precise astronomical information in their mythologies. And you read that and you think, how could they possibly have had access to that information all that time ago?
The Dogon, they say they were visited by beings from the solar system of Sirius. The humans asked the gods, where do you come from? And they gave names, but the names mean nothing to us. The names are the names of them. To us, it's a word which has no meaning on the firmament. So we don't know where they came from, and we don't know where they went. Definitely they went back, and they promised to return. They are back again.
Well, the creation story of the Dogon is absolutely wonderful. They basically found that in the beginning there was this almighty entity called Amma, suspiciously close to Amun. He sets up and creates the twins. The first set of twins that came out of the earth came out a little bit early. So they were considered to be imperfect, and that came to symbolize the human race. But there was another group of twins that came out that were absolutely perfect, and they were called the Nomos. And the Nomos basically were these sort of amphibious water creatures, and because they were so perfect that when they finally died, they went to a place called Paradise, which the Dogon claimed to be somewhere in Sirius, the star Sirius. After Nomos have gone to Paradise and Sirius, they said, we're going to go back to the Earth. And when the Nomos landed, they said that they basically gave the civilizing arts to humanity, which back then was living a very barbaric life. And what's astonishing about the story, apart from the fact the story is astonishing in itself as a depiction of how creation began in their point of view, is the fact that it mirrors so many other creation myths throughout the world, whether it's in South America or Polynesia. There are very, very great similarities between the Dogon and other cultures as well.
What's fascinating about the linguistics surrounding the Nomos is that in ancient India you have the Nagas, who were a half serpent, half human-looking deity. In Australia, with the Aboriginal tribes, they had the Nurrumbungutias. Linguistically, these names are all so close together that they had to have had a singular origin.
The Nomos are described as a race of amphibious beings bearing both humanoid and fish-like attributes. A mythology with roots in ancient Mesopotamia tells of a similar race of beings called the Apkallu, advanced beings also described as part man and part fish. Berossus, a Greek priest of the 3rd century BCE, wrote down the Babylonian legend of the fishmen, sent from the heavens to impart knowledge to people. First among the fishmen was Oannes, who Berossus credited with teaching our ancestors the tools of civilization. Similarities can be found with the Mesopotamian deity Dagon or Dagon, also described as half fish, half man.
What makes it even more amazing? When you look at Neolithic cultures, the idea that there are evolving, standing up primates coming in various models, and they come up over 2 million years from Lucy in Africa, and you get to Mesopotamia and the idea that the tribes that have no writing, they have no math, they have no ability to build perfect pyramids, and within a tiny short period of time, you have this entire Sumerian culture that is building megastructures and language. When you come back through the last couple of centuries, what has been the mantra? That Homo sapiens sapien came up out of the jungle and out of mud, and that 5,000 years ago, they built the pyramids. They built these huge structures that we relate to Sumeria. And probably in South America, at the same time, structures were being built there because the same builders in Mesopotamia were building in Mexico, Central America, South America. It was a global architecture.
The ancient Egyptians associated the goddess Isis with the star Sirius. The star also has a connection with Osiris, Anubis, and Sopdet, the goddess of Sirius. The name Sopdet means she who is sharp. Sopdet was said to have made the soil bear crops and was the consort of the entity known as Sa, associated with the constellation of Orion.
Could it be that Sirius itself is the repository of a specific type of wisdom from where came creatures of a certain humanoid nature, which were kind of like us, but still very different, because they reside in every single culture in the world. And all of these people came to the Earth after a barbaric time to give us the stuff that we know today, mathematics, astronomy, how to create temples with monolithic blocks and things like that, agriculture, animal husbandry. They all go back to these people whose source always ends up in Sirius. So, were they real? Or was a myth to explain a specific point in the universe where things really originate from?
The Nomos were representatives of the order on Earth. These beings were amphibious beings, fish-like creatures, which were eerily mysterious. Now, if we take a look at other mythologies, for example, ancient Atlantis, we will find that Atlantis has similar beings described there, called the Telkines. The Telkines were the beings who possessed incredible knowledge in metallurgy. These beings were the bringers of knowledge. If we take a look at ancient Egypt or ancient Sumeria, we will find that several other beings existed in those mythologies as well. So we will find the same beings existing in their accounts, but with different names.
Is this recurring theme of encounters with beings from the stars merely a literary coincidence? Could the Dogon tribe be carrying the memory of real encounters with beings from the Sirius star system?
In my personal research, I believe that the knowledge of the Nomos actually came from their time in ancient Egypt and being part of the ancient Egyptian priesthood. The Dogon said that they had actually came from ancient Egypt. Now that's fascinating because in ancient Egypt, what we find is the fact that there is a direct correlation between the mass of the Great Pyramid and the mass of the Pyramid of Khephren that is an exact mathematical mirroring of the difference between the mass of Sirius B and the mass of our star. That is the fraction 1.036. It's known as the comma of Pythagoras, and it is alluding to harmonic mathematical theory, the idea that one body can vibrate in such a way that it causes change in another. That was what the ancient mystery schools had as the heart of their secret.
The Dogon probably are part of that offshoot that were holding on to a very old lineage of teachings, who then by either war, cultural changes, or just a mere fact that the weather kept changing all the time, they then migrated westwards to where they are today. But within their social structure and their spiritual structure, you had this concept of a creator god called Amun, or Amma. And the two are basically interchangeable, because when you look at the ancient principle of what Amun stands for and Amma, they're the same being.
This is where things turn fascinating, and it's my main point of research, is the fact that, as I've spoken of before, the mathematics of harmonic resonance were built into these ancient monuments. This was done by the Anunnaki, who were cast down on the earth after their deceit to Anu, because that was the scenario left to Enki and his 200 followers. And they set about building the only thing that they could build, which was these amazing ancient stone structures that we couldn't even build to this day. They built into the actual mathematics of these ancient stone structures the very closely held secret of all ancient mystery schools and occult traditions. This secret, the fact that the human body itself, through the 7 chakra zones, which also equate to the 7 notes in a musical octave, can, through harmonic resonance, affect the reality fabric around us. and that's done through what they call light wave harmonics. Chakras are called wheels of light for a reason, and each one vibrates to a different octave, if you will. That's the exact same knowledge that they built into these monuments, knowing that eventually we would be able to discover that and use it as the Promethean keys of our escape. The star Sirius resonates harmonically with our star. That means that, imagine you walk into a room, and in the room there's a gentleman playing the violin, and on the other side of the room there's a piano that nobody's at. You can walk over to the piano and look down at the strings, and each string will vibrate to a note being played on the violin across the room. It's that mechanism that we're talking about, and that relationship exists between Sirius and our star, meaning that a perturbation, a change in one, will take place instantaneously in the next. That may be the reason why the Anunnaki or the Nommos or the Nagas or Nurmagutias came here. They were following this harmonic highway through the star system. The fact that that relationship exists at all between two stellar bodies that are 8.7 light years away is an indication to us that that same relationship exists over the entire universe. And because they were responsible for developing our biology, they knew that that same mechanism existed within the human body, that they literally built within us the ability to control our own reality through it. This knowledge became the knowledge of all the ancient mystery schools, the knowledge of how to actually attune yourself to these frequencies in such a way that you can cause change in conformity with will. That's the great secret of magic practices, and what the Egyptian priesthood wanted forever to try to preserve, and have largely done so. The knowledge is still alive and well in a lot of different occult priesthoods around the world. I would argue in my research that there was a connection between these cultures that stems back way, way beyond what modern day historians have been able to trace. And the reason for that is not only the similarity between their pantheon of gods, but the similarity in the structures that they built. And that it all goes back to a much earlier time when maybe the Mesoamericans came from a completely different part of the world. What's fascinating about Osiris and Horus and Quetzalcoatl is their connection to the star Sirius. What you have with Quetzalcoatl is a god that has a twin brother with a dog head. He becomes the star Sirius, and he guards the sun through the underworld, much the same as Anubis was the guardian of the underworld.
Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, humans suddenly develop agriculture, the animal husbandry, the organization of crops, organizing themselves into a cultural group where they develop cities and communal areas that hadn't happened before. And it happened in the blink of an eye out of barbarism. So obviously there had to be an outside influence of people who really understood the civilizing qualities of nature in order to bring that to people who had lost touch with that concept. What amazes me is that this story survived for over 8,000 years in the Dogon culture, and even more incredibly, it survives into our era. Think about it for a second. The Lord's Prayer. If you find the original Lord's Prayer in Egypt, it starts as Amun, 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 who resides in heaven. Glorious is your name. Sounds familiar?
Correlating stories can be found woven throughout history, documented all over the world among ancient civilizations separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. This interweaving story documents the arrival of advanced beings, ancient aliens who came to our planet from the distant reaches of space and imparted information to our distant ancestors. The memory of it lies in the dawn of our civilization, morphing into multiple tellings and interpretations around the world and through the ages. Yet ultimately, the memories these stories hold are one and the same. The question of how the Dogon people could have acquired this knowledge is debated to this day. How did they know about Sirius C 60 years ahead of modern science? How did they know about the white dwarf star Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye, and both only recently discovered by modern science? The mystery remains. Thank you for watching The Fifth Kind in association with Gaia.com. Follow the links to unlock the entire Gaia library